All right, people, we are going to get going here with chapter 13 of The People of Sparks. We'll start off with the last paragraph from chapter 12. But the idea that stuck her was this. Maybe the people of Ember were meant to restore the city. Perhaps their great job, the reason they had come up into this new world, was to live in the city and rebuild it, so that once again it was the glorious shining city of Lina's vision. This was such a beautiful idea. That night she lay in bed thinking about it, and the more she thought, the more she was sure. The more sure she was, and the more excited. So if we think back to chapter 12, remember Casper had come back with his partner Maddie, and they wanted to go to this old broken down, torn down city, and Lina was really interested in it. She really wanted to know more, and we can tell here at the end the author's really leading us on to somewhere. She's really wanting us to think ahead and predict what's going to happen without her actually saying anything. She's giving us some pretty interesting ideas, and I've heard some really good predictions from you already. So let's move on. Chapter 13, Taking Action. One evening, Dune wandered off by himself toward the far corner of the hotel, where the trees grew thickly and the undergrowth beneath them was dense. He made his way into the woods to a thicket of vines, all woven together like thorny ropes. Little lumpy fruits, some red and some black, grew on these vines. Dune had already discovered that the red ones were hard and sour, but if left to ripen, they turned black and sweet. What do you think those could be? In the comment section, if you want, why don't you write what you think these little fruits are, these berries. He had been checking the vines regularly. Each day there were more and more of the black ones. Today he saw there were more black berries than red ones. He began picking them. Some he ate right from the vine. They were sweet and juicy. Others he put in a basket he'd brought with him to take back to the others in room 212. He heard footsteps behind him. A voice, he recognized it instantly, called out, "Dune!" He turned around, and there was Tick striding toward him, smiling his dazzling smile. Dune stood up. He'd been squatting to reach for the berries on the lowest vines. "Look what I found," he said. Oh, this was Dune. He wouldn't say it like that. He'd been squatting to reach for the berries on the lowest vines. "Look what I found," he said, holding out a handful of berries to Tick. Tick took one and popped it into his mouth. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Terrific," he said. He took the rest of them from Dune's palm. "So," he said, "are you going to save us again?" "Save us?" said Dune, confused. "Yes, from starvation. You're the hero of Ember. It's about time for you to save us again." It flustered Dune to be called a hero. He wasn't sure if Tick was admiring him or making fun of him. He couldn't think what to say next. Tick reached into the thicket and plucked a few berries for himself. "These are good," he said. "Mind if I take some?" "They don't belong to me," said Dune. "Anyone can have them." Tick hunted among the vines for a while, picking berries and popping them into his mouth. Then he said, "You know that building they call the Ark?" Dune nodded. "Ever been in it?" "No," said Dune. "Just in the separate room at the back. They have books in there. You should see them. There must be thousands." Tick didn't comment on the books. "I went in there the other day," he said. "They had me carry in a crate of pickled beets into it's their storehouse, you know. They say they're short on food." Ha! Tick gave a laugh that was more like a bark. "That place is full of food." "Really?" said Dune. "Really," said Tick, tossing 3 berries into his mouth. There's jars of preserved fruit and sacks of dried fruit and every kind of pickle and bags of corn, loads and loads of food. And we get limp carrots for our dinners. I believe there's a bit of stinginess going on here." Dune frowned. He thought of his father, looking with dismay last night at the scanty contents of his dinner parcel. He thought about what Ordney had said at lunch the week before. "We just don't have enough food for 400 extra people." Was this untrue after all? Tick had moved a few steps away and found a patch that was thick with berries. He was picking them rapidly, eating each one. When he spoke, his words sounded a little juicy. "I don't know about you," he said, "but I don't like unfairness." "I don't either," said Dune. He walked over to Tick and offered him the handful of berries he'd just collected. Tick took them all. "I believe an unfair situation needs to be corrected," Tick said. "Corrected how?" Tick wiped his red-stained fingers on his pants. "Well," he said, "that's something we have to figure out." "We," thought Dune. He liked that. Though he'd stopped taking part so often in Tick's projects, he admired Tick's energy and felt his power. He was glad Tick had sought him out. He was glad that Tick seemed to consider him different from the others, smarter, more important. "You're right," he said. "We should do something." Tick nodded. "I don't trust these Sparks people," he said. "In some ways, they seem very primitive. Do you know that they make fire by hitting two stones together?" "They do?" Dune hadn't seen anyone starting a fire since he was rarely in kitchens. He knew that the fire in the bakery was kept going all the time. He'd seen people going in there sometimes carrying candles that had gone out. "They don't have matches?" he said. "Sometimes they do," said Tick, "but not always. Matches seem to be rare." "We should give them some of ours," said Dune. All the people who'd come out of Ember had the matches that were supplied with the boats. The Emberites had hundreds of matches. "Oh, I don't think so," Tick said quickly. "We need them. We have to keep those for ourselves." Dune wondered why, when they had so many, but he thought maybe matches figured somehow into Tick's plans. "So you're with me," said Tick. "Sure," said Dune. Then he hesitated. "With you in what?" "Action," said Tick. "You took action before, when there was an urgent situation. We may need to take action again pretty soon." Dune still didn't know what Tick had in mind, but he had asked no more questions. Tick had a way of letting you know that he'd given all the answers he was going to give. "All right," Dune said. "I'm with you." "Good," said Tick. He held out his hand and Dune shook it. Tick grinned and walked away. Dune watched him lope across the field. For a moment, he was lost in his thoughts. Food in the storehouse, stinginess, unfairness. Figure something out. You're with me. When he came to himself again and glanced down at his hands, he was startled to see them streaked with blood. Had he scratched himself on the thorns of the vines? It took him a second to realize what looked like blood was only berry juice, passed to his hands from Tick's. Lina made a plan. She'd hide among the boxes and crates on Casper's truck, and she would ride that way to the city. It was only a day's journey away. Surely she'd be able to find a way back. There must be other roamers on the roads. Of course, she could just ask Casper if she could go with him, but she was sure he'd say no. He was on some kind of important business. He wouldn't want to be bothered with her. It was best to go secretly. Once she had seen the city, she would know if it was the place where the people of Ember were destined to live. She was sure she'd know as soon as she saw it. Then she could hop out of the truck and find her way back. Casper might never see her at all. The next day, she tore part of a blank page out of one of the doctor's notebooks and wrote one of the doctor's books and wrote this note. "Dear Mrs. M, I have gone with Casper and Maddie on the truck. I will be back in 2 days, or maybe 3. There is something important I want to find out. Also, I need a change from here. See you soon. Love, Lina. Her plan was to wait until that night, when Mrs. Murdo was asleep, and tuck the note between the pages of the ancient crumbling book she had been reading, something called Charlotte's Web. She kept urging Lina to look at it, but Lina said she wasn't that interested in spiders. It would be better for Dune. Mrs. Murdo read only in the evening, so Lina would have at least a day's head start before anyone knew where she was. A few doubts about her plan lurked in the back of Lina's mind. She knew Mrs. Murdo would worry about her. Poppy would miss her. And Lina didn't really like Casper or trust him, and she knew that he and Maddie would probably be angry if they found out that she had come along. It was a bit of a risky journey she was embarking on, but anything truly important also involved risks, didn't it? She had taken a huge risk before in the last days of Ember, and it had been the right thing to do. So probably this was the right thing too. She was so sure the city was their destination, and she was so determined to see the city for herself that she turned her mind away from her doubts. It would be an adventure, she told herself. She would be fine. She got up before the sun the next morning. She crept out of her bed on the floor, one tiny motion at a time. Poppy didn't stir, nor did Mrs. Murdo in her bed on the couch. In the half-darkness, Lina put her clothes on and pulled the pillowcase bag she'd packed the night before from its hiding place in the window seat. She tucked her note between the pages of Mrs. Murdo's book. Then, carrying her bag, she opened the door so softly it made no noise and went out into the courtyard. Just beyond the gate, the truck was standing ready. The oxen weren't attached to it yet. They were down the road at the barn to be brought later by the stable hand. Lina climbed onto the back of the truck. Its metal bottom was gritty with dust and bits of dry grass. It was loaded with 4 large barrels, 2 bicycles strapped together, a box full of tubs and buckets, and 4 big wooden crates made of slats of wood spaced about an inch apart. The crates were taller than Lina and about 4 feet square, like small rooms almost. 3 of them were full of goods to be sold, but the 4th was empty. Its contents had been sold in sparks. That one would be Lina's hiding place. Getting into it was easy. First, she tossed her bag over the side, and then she climbed up the slats, as if they were a ladder, and jumped down in. The wood was rough and splintery, but she had prepared for that. She brought a small blanket from her bed. She spread this on the bottom of the crate and lay down on it, using her bag of supplies as a pillow. She was sure that if she lay very still, no one would see her. And she was right. An hour or so later, she didn't know for sure how long, but the sun was now shining through the slats in the crate, and she could feel its warmth on her back. She heard the clatter of the gate latch and voices, Torrance first. "But I'd be helpful," he said in a tearful, desperate wail. "I would! I know how to tie tots, and I can—"
"Now that's enough," said Casper. "You're not coming with us. Get it through your hard little head. You're not old enough. Roaming is a dangerous business. It's not for children."
"She gets to go," Torrance said.
"Well, of course. She's not a child. She's my partner."
Lina felt a jolt as the box holding Casper's and Maddie's belongings was heaved up onto the truck.
"Here comes Joe with the oxen, right on time," said Casper.
The truck squeaked and trembled as the oxen were hitched to it. Lina heard the gate latch clatter again, and then the doctor's voice. "When will you be back this way?"
"Not for a while." The truck slanted as Casper got on. "Several months is my guess. We've got a big route planned out."
"You should be taking me!" cried Torrin. "You'll be sorry you didn't. I'll tell on you. I'll tell Uncle."
Casper chuckled. "Uncle would not be interested," he said. "He's much too busy. Always had been." There was a crack of the whip. "Goodbye, little brother."
Casper called, and the truck jolted forward. Ooh, part 2. How exciting. Let me read this part again and see if you caught this. I'm right here. Remember, Lina's already in the truck, hidden in the crate. The truck squealed and trembled as the oxen were hitched to it. Lina heard the gate latch and the doctor's voice. When will you be back this way? Not for a while. The truck slanted as Casper got on. Several months is my guess. We've got a big route planned. So remember back to the beginning, how many days was Lina planning for? But now, how many days / months is actually happening? Yikes. So there it is. That is chapter 13. And we move on to part 2 called Travelers and Warriors. Okay. Chapter 13. I'll go this way. Chapter 13, this is your job for chapter 13. You're going to create your new slide on your Spark slideshow. Number 1, you need to write down 2 important events that happened in this chapter. Number 2, moving here, 1 personal connection to something that happened in that chapter. And number 3, you're going to put yourself in Lina's shoes when she hears the length of the trip. So, you are Lina sitting in that crate, hiding away in the box. Your plan is to stay for 2 or 3 days, be back to see Poppy and Mrs. Murdo and Dune. And it's revealed that the plan is actually to be gone for several months. So you need to write at least 3 or 4 sentences explaining how Lina feels when she hears that. What emotions goes through her head? What kinds of things does she think about? What does she worry about? Does she have fears about being out on the road or missing something at home? So you're in her shoes, writing down what's going through her mind when she hears that. Okay, that's chapter 13.